Let's start with a glass-half-full approach to analyzing last night's final presidential debate. There was definitely more discussion about policy than in the previous matchups, like when Hillary Clinton talked about raising the cap on income eligibility for Social Security contributions.
My Social Security payroll contribution will go up, as will Donald's, assuming he can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is to replenish the Social Security Trust Fund.
And so it went, the disdain palpable for millions of TV viewers. The night's most memorable moment came when moderator Chris Wallace asked Donald Trump about his claims of a rigged election and whether he'll accept its outcome like his running mate and daughter have said they would.
Do you make the same commitment that you will absolutely, sir, that you will absolutely accept the result of this election?
I will look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time.
That is not the way our democracy works. We've been around for 240 years. It just shows you're not up to doing the job. And let's be clear about what he is saying and what that means. He is denigrating. He's talking down our democracy. And I, for one, am appalled that somebody who is the nominee of one of our two major parties would take that kind of position.
There were many testy exchanges on issues like immigration, the Supreme Court, but in the end, much of the night was spent on familiar themes. His accusation that she's part of the status quo, and hers that he isn't fit to be a president for all people.
The one thing you have over me is experience, but it's bad experience because what you've done has turned out badly.
Donald thinks belittling women makes him bigger. He goes after their dignity, their self-worth, and I don't think there is a woman anywhere who doesn't know what that feels like.
So how did the voters feel about last night's face-off? A CNN poll found 52% of debate watchers thought Clinton won, while 39% believed the night went to Trump. Those numbers falling pretty much in line with many recent polls of voter preference. This afternoon, Trump was back out, firing up his core supporters, and got a big response with this remark.
I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win.
It's hard to figure out what the strategy is here, but joining me to discuss what it could be are former ABC White House correspondent Ann Compton, who's a fellow this semester at the Institute of Politics at Harvard. It's great to see you again, Ann.
Hey,
Thanks for being here. And Carly Carioli, a contributing editor of Politico. Same to you, Carly. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I have to say, I don't get it. Assuming that, as we just said here, his campaign manager, everybody else is saying we'll accept the results, he doesn't. What's the strategy? What is he trying to achieve?
I thought it was vintage Trump. He's the unconventional candidate. He's run without his party's big backing. Why? I guess especially in light of 2000 when it went into recounted up to the court, that he's not going to embrace anything. And maybe it shows that he thinks he might lose.
That may be part of this thing, too. But the flip side of me says maybe he's in denial about winning or losing. Maybe he's got another strategy. What's your take on this thing?
I think it's been clear for the past 3 weeks or so that this is not about the election. The stuff that he's doing doesn't seem calculated to get him any more votes. It really does seem to just undermine the process. I think he's...
To what end? Party in exile after November 9th? Is that what it is?
Well, certainly there's the idea that maybe he's going to start a TV network. Whether or not he does, I could see him going out November 9th and doing something to try to continue to undermine the Democratic elected official, such as trying to get some momentum behind impeaching Hillary Clinton. I mean, his entire process here has been to undermine her credibility.
You have to be sworn in before you can be impeached.
Well, I think we're about to find out, right?
It's really interesting. This delegitimization thing. Obviously, we know Trump was the guy in chief, the birther in chief thing on Kenya. And someone said a variation of what you said today to me is that he's doing the exact same thing. And she's a criminal, and as a result, she's not even entitled to run, which he's been saying. So is it essentially Birther the sequel? Is that what's happening here?
Well, I think it's Donald Trump reverting to kind of his core sense of it's about him, it's about his entertainment value, the chance that he has to appeal to voters, especially in that closing summation he did last night. All of the bullet points, exactly the kind of red meat he dishes up at every one of those rallies.
How damaging is this to democracy? Assuming it doesn't end on November 8th, which I'm subscribed to your notion. I don't know if it's a TV show, a party, a de facto party. How damaging is this kind of behavior to democracy, starting with you?
But on November 9th, if Donald Trump loses, let's make there's no question here. Hillary Clinton is going to be president, and she's going to take the oath of office.
There's no question Barack Obama wasn't born in Kenya. We talked about that for 3 or 4 years.
The larger question, I think, is the concern is you only need one crazy person to take this seriously to have something horrible happen. And I think there is some calculation about keeping that small 30% of the electorate that he controls right now, and aiming that at some other enterprise, whether it's a media enterprise or another, an attempt to try to corner the Republican base.
Do you think there's another enterprise?
Oh, no,
or no?
he's not a party builder. He's never really been part of the Republican Party. He's not going to stick around and try to rebuild the Republican Party in his own image.
So what does he do? I mean, is it the TV show?
Back to entertainment and building hotels.
I don't know if I was going to say you may consider this petty, but you've been around a long time, and my guess is you won't. When they walked out last night and didn't shake hands
again,
and then they left and didn't shake hands again, I really don't care for that. To me, it sends a message to young people, others, of incivility writ large. Am I making too much out of this or no?
The establishment absolutely agrees with you. There is a civility about democracy that we treasure. Donald Trump has been unconventional every step of the way.
Well, she didn't walk over to him and shake his hand either. This was a mutual unshaking at the beginning and the end. Some people think she was trying to do it at the end. But,
if he sniffled like that, would you want to shake his hand? She's going to get his cold.
Well, but in all seriousness, I was saying to myself, I obsess on these things, I must admit. If one of them had the brains or the decency, once they were at their podiums at the beginning, to leave their podium and walk over to the other person, to me, they would have gotten millions of points from voters who were as upset about this incivility as the three of us are, no?
But if you're Hillary Clinton and he's just called you what he called you not 30 seconds before, I think that makes it much harder than it had been in the last debate where they sort of shook and made up at the end. Because he's removed some basic sense of decency from the exchange.
So is this the new normal or is this an aberration? I mean, I want you to say to me it's an aberration and after November 8th this will be history. But this incivility, for example, where people treat each other so wildly disrespectfully.
But we see that same thing on Capitol Hill, don't we, with two factions within the own Republican Party in the House who won't speak to each other. I think there is a pendulum that has swung dangerously toward the lack of even comedy between political forces, and I don't see it swinging back quite yet.
What did you think of Mike Wallace last night?
Chris Wallace.
Oh, Chris Wallace, excuse me, thank you.
I thought
Mike Wallace couldn't make it, that's a good point. His son, Chris Wallace.
I thought he was clearly the best moderator of the three debates, and you could he kept a steady hand. And he called them both out. I don't know what else you could ask for.
I thought he was the best. You had a caveat to go along with that,
Well,
yes?
For much of the debate, he had two pretty well-behaving candidates. It wasn't the Trump walking up behind Clinton and shadowing or that we got at the second debate. So I think Chris lucked out, but he did get some good issues on the table.
Can we go spend another minute on November 9th, because that's where my obsession is. Let's assume Hillary Clinton wins the election. The Democrats take the Senate. They take their 5 seats, but they don't get the 30 they need to flip in the House so that it's a Republican House. Explain to me how she governs in the environment we've been discussing for the last 5 minutes. How does she govern?
Americans like divided government, and that makes the president have to walk across the aisle, go call down. Remember George Bush reaching out to Teddy Kennedy? The first person he reached out to when he got into office was getting Kennedy's help on No Child Left Behind.
That was a different time. You know that. How many things did
different
Barack Obama achieve after he lost control of Congress after the first 2 years during which the Affordable Care Act passed?
Numbers will count. Anybody who is elected with a strong electoral mandate, be it the Electoral College or the popular vote, has a lot more clout when she unpacks her bags.
You're as optimistic as she is?
I think it depends on the scenario you outlined. How badly do they lose the down ballot stuff? Certainly, you've got Republicans who are already lining up to say that they're going to be obstructionist when Hillary Clinton gets in. They're going to block her Supreme Court nominations. Both parties have a reckoning coming on November 9th, and I think that's one of the big questions is how does that shake out in both parties?
So you cover the White House forever. It's a year from now, 2 years from now. Hillary Clinton is in her first term. What's the reflection back on this whole Trump phenomenon for over the last year? What do people say?
By then we'll be into the next election, including the midterms.
But how will that be seen?
Well, I think this election leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, and it will go down in history. It's already gone down in history as a kind of experience that nobody wants to go through again.
Well, in the up note, as I say almost every night, only 19 days and the long national nightmare is over. And it's a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you.
Carly, thank you so much for your
you.
time. Appreciate it.